This photograph shows the side panels of milk cartons from the 1980s, plastered with the faces of missing children. Every decade in the United States, hundreds of thousands of kids vanish without a trace. A few hours east of those missing posters sits Camp Hero. Camp Hero is a former military base at the eastern tip of Long Island, New York. Officially, it operated as a coastal defense and radar station until the Air Force decommissioned and abandoned it in 1969. This image shows the massive, rusting SAGE radar dish that still looms over the overgrown brush there today. But according to a circle of whistleblowers and insiders, the facility never actually closed. They alleged that the derelict exterior was a cover for a highly classified black project operating off the books, focused entirely on abducted youth, known as the Montauk Boys. These accounts describe an industrial-scale paramilitary pipeline designed to systematically harvest and weaponize human youth in 3 distinct phases. Phase 1 was acquisition, and it relied on a rigid targeting profile. The operatives specifically sought out Caucasian, blonde, blue-eyed boys entering puberty. They required subjects who possessed specific genetic markers and high IQs. IQ, or intelligence quotient, is a standard score derived from standardized tests used to assess human intelligence and cognitive abilities. In the project's early days, the acquisition tactics were crude. Operatives drove vans around Long Island neighborhoods late at night, physically snatching local teenagers off the streets and bringing them back to the base. As the program scaled up, the strategy shifted. This photograph captures a vintage, grimy New York City street scene from the era. Instead of risking exposure in quiet, suburban neighborhoods, the project began targeting homeless, runaway, and street kids from major urban centers like this one. This shift was driven by a cold logistical calculus. Society's most vulnerable and invisible populations made the perfect raw materials because they could be absorbed into the system without leaving a traceable trail. Once acquired, the boys were moved into the subterranean levels of Camp Hero. Here, the focus shifted to breaking the subjects into total submission. The initial programming method relied heavily on the stick. Operatives subjected the boys to severe physical abuse and induced terror, combined with intense physical combat training, to deliberately fracture their psyches. Eventually, the directors realized they could achieve better compliance with a carrot. They began offering these impoverished street kids secret bank accounts and the promise of future education in direct exchange for their blind cooperation. This animated diagram illustrates the next step: electronic conditioning. Subjects were hooked up to machines that monitored their EEG. An EEG, or electroencephalogram, is a test that detects electrical activity in the brain using small electrodes attached to the scalp. The erratic, spiked brainwaves caused by trauma were artificially flattened, smoothed, and overwritten by a steady, synthetic pulse to erase their memories of the abuse. Through this evolution from primitive brute force to sophisticated psychological engineering, the victims were successfully molded into highly compliant, memory-wiped sleeper agents. The final phase of the pipeline was application, where the broken boys were interfaced with a device known as the Montauk chair. The Montauk chair is alleged to be a specialized piece of esoteric hardware designed to read and massively amplify human thoughts. This image shows a vintage IBM 360 computer mainframe room. The chair was wired directly into massive, era-specific mainframe computers, exactly like these, to capture and digitize the boys' mental frequencies. This schematic illustrates how the boys were physically restrained in the chair, enclosed within 3 intersecting rings. These rings represent X, Y, and Z Helmholtz coils. Helmholtz coils are an arrangement of identical circular magnetic coils placed in parallel, used to produce a region of nearly uniform magnetic field. Here, they generated a contained energy field designed to completely isolate the subjects' minds. Inside this isolated field, the boys were forced into altered states of consciousness. Operatives used induced terror or severe abuse to trigger massive spikes of primal, raw psychic energy from the subjects. The mainframe computers then decoded this raw emotional output and redirected it. The amplified energy violently arced outward, ripping open localized wormholes, or dimensional time tunnels, right there inside the military base. This generated video simulates the horrifying final step. The boys were treated as disposable guinea pigs and physically forced to jump into these highly unstable portals. They were sent into the dark to test if the tunnels were safe enough for military personnel to use. The application phase reduced human life to a biological battery. The subjects were expended entirely to fuel the military-industrial complex's most dangerous physics experiments. By the early 1980s, whistleblowers claimed the original Montauk Boys Program decentralized. Operations were reportedly moved off Long Island and scattered across undisclosed underground locations nationwide. The most staggering claim from insiders is that tens of thousands of these programmed individuals actually survived the pipeline and are now unknowingly integrated into normal modern society. Those involved with the project claim they can still spot these survivors today. They look for unexplained PTSD, missing childhood memories, and permanently damaged auras. PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, is a psychiatric condition triggered by experiencing or witnessing a terrifying physical or emotional event. Whether viewed as suppressed historical fact or a dark modern myth, the Montauk Boys pipeline taps into our deepest societal anxieties. It illustrates the extreme vulnerability of missing youth and the horror of humans being treated as expendable machinery.